Picture this. You're in a meditation retreat, day 5 of silence. Your legs are numb, your back aches, and your mind is screaming louder than a fire alarm. Meanwhile, everyone around you looks like they're floating in blissful enlightenment. And you? You may want to know if there's a spiritual customer service desk where you can return your broken meditation practice. Here's what nobody told you in that moment, and what even well-meaning teachers often miss. You might have been closer to real awakening than anyone else in that room. I know that sounds impossible. But what if the very struggle that made you feel like a spiritual failure was actually the doorway to breakthrough? What if everything you've been taught about getting enlightened has it completely backwards? This isn't just another spiritual theory. This is about why some people have life-changing awakenings while stuck in traffic, while others meditate for decades and feel more disconnected than when they started. Today, you're going to discover the hidden trap that keeps 90% of spiritual seekers stuck in endless pursuit, and the one shift that changes everything. But first, let me ask you something that might sting a little. How much have you invested in your spiritual journey? I don't just mean money, though that number might shock you. I mean time, energy, hope, and emotional investment. Retreats, courses, books, apps, healers, supplements, and crystals. The meditation cushions, the yoga mats, the vision boards, the gratitude journals. Now here's the question that cuts to the bone. Are you significantly more awakened now than when you started? And I mean really awakened, not just more knowledgeable about spiritual concepts, not just calmer sometimes, but actually living from that deeper truth you're seeking. If you're brutally honest, you might admit something uncomfortable. Sometimes you feel more confused, more spiritually hungry, more frustrated with the gap between what you know and what you actually experience than when you began. Let me tell you about Sarah because her story might sound familiar. Sarah attended 47 spiritual workshops in 2 years. 47. Her apartment looked like a metaphysical store exploded. Crystals on every surface, vision boards covering the walls, meditation cushions in 3 different rooms. Her Instagram was a spiritual highlight reel. Glowing testimonials, serene selfies with eyes closed, in meditation poses, inspirational quotes overlaid on sunset photos. But late at night, alone with the soft glow of her Himalayan salt lamp casting long shadows across her shrine-like living room, Sarah felt more disconnected from herself than ever. All that seeking had created such thick layers of spiritual identity that she couldn't find the simple, quiet person underneath anymore. Then one Tuesday, stuck in traffic after another workshop that promised transformation but delivered more concepts, something cracked open. Not during the guided meditation. Not in the sacred ceremony. Right there, surrounded by honking horns and exhaust fumes, in a moment of pure, raw frustration. What happened next reveals the one thing that changes everything about spiritual seeking. Here's the trap that catches almost everyone. We've been sold the idea that enlightenment is something you achieve through spiritual accomplishments. It's like a video game where you level up through meditation hours, workshop certificates, and technique collection. Your spiritual resume gets longer, but somehow the goal feels farther away. This creates what I call the seeker's high, where the pursuit itself becomes addictive. Your ego loves this because it gets to feel evolved while staying completely in control. You're seeking awakening, but you're really just building a more sophisticated prison. Here's the crazy part. Your mind prefers seeking to finding. Why? Because finding would end the game. And your ego's job is to keep the game going forever. So it creates this brilliant strategy, spiritual materialism disguised as spiritual growth. You collect experiences. I had this amazing breakthrough in breathwork. You accumulate insights. I finally understood non-duality during that retreat. You chase peak states. If I could just get back to that feeling I had during that ceremony. But here's what nobody tells you about peak experiences. They're not awakening, they're just peak experiences. Chasing them is like trying to live permanently in the moment you fell in love, instead of learning to love. Real awakening isn't a peak experience you achieve. It's a recognition of what's already here, right now, in this ordinary moment. Think about trying to catch your own shadow. The harder you run after it, the faster it moves away. But the moment you stop chasing and turn toward the light, you realize there was never anything to catch. The shadow was just the absence of light hitting you. Spiritual seeking works the same way. The seeker and the sought are both illusions created by the very search itself. So if seeking doesn't work, what does? The answer might irritate every spiritual bone in your body. Ready for this? Awakening happens when you stop trying to become awakened. I can already hear your spiritual ego having a tantrum, but that's spiritual bypassing. You have to do the work. You can't just sit around waiting. But what if doing the work is just another story your mind tells itself to avoid the simplicity of what you already are? Let me share an ancient story that completely dismantles the seeking game. A desperate student burst into a Zen temple, falling to his knees before the master. The air was thick with incense, candlelight flickering across worn wooden floors. "Master," he cried, "I'll do anything for enlightenment. I'll meditate 20 hours a day, give up all worldly pleasures, memorize every sutra." The old master looked at him with eyes that had seen through this drama 1,000 times before. "Tell me," the master said quietly, "how do you fall asleep at night?" The student was confused. "How do I... what? I lie down and sleep comes." "And what happens if you try really hard to fall asleep?" "Well, the harder I try, the more awake I become." "Exactly," smiled the master. Enlightenment is no different. The moment you stop trying to grasp it, it's already here. This isn't just a cute parable. This is the master key that unlocks everything. When you force awakening, you're like someone trying to relax by clenching every muscle in their body. The very effort creates the exact tension you're trying to release. Here's what's actually happening. Real awakening isn't becoming something new, it's recognizing what was never not here. You don't need to purify yourself to deserve it. You don't need to earn enough spiritual merit points. You don't need to fix yourself first. You need to recognize that the you who thinks it needs awakening and the awakening it thinks it needs are both movements in the same dream. But here's where this gets really interesting, and why the spiritual industry doesn't want you to know this. There's an uncomfortable truth about why this paradox isn't taught everywhere. If awakening chooses you based on natural readiness rather than effort, there's no market for endless courses. Think about it. If I told you that your next breakthrough might happen while you're washing dishes, binge-watching Netflix, or yelling at your kids, not because you earned it through spiritual practices, but because life decided you were ready, would you still pay thousands for my ultimate consciousness certification? The spiritual marketplace has accidentally created the perfect business model, selling something that can't be purchased to people who don't realize they already have it. And here's the thing, most teachers aren't consciously deceiving you. Many are genuine seekers themselves, teaching what they hope to find, sharing tools that help them feel better. But feeling better isn't the same as waking up. Even the most sincere teacher can get caught in the trap, convinced that their next insight, their next method, their next level of training will finally deliver the goods. But here's what's beautiful about your spiritual exhaustion, that frustration you feel with spiritual theater. That's clarity arising. That exhaustion with trying to become someone else? That's wisdom recognizing the futility of the chase. Your disillusionment isn't spiritual failure, it's spiritual maturity. Remember Sarah from earlier? Here's what happened in that traffic jam. Stuck between two trucks, late for another appointment, road rage bubbling up, Sarah suddenly started laughing. Not the gentle, spiritual kind of laughter. Raw, slightly hysterical laughter. "This is insane," she said out loud to her empty car. "I'm paying someone to teach me how to be myself." In that moment of complete spiritual breakdown, something she'd been seeking for years was suddenly, obviously present. Not as a result of all her practices. Not because she finally got enlightened, but because she finally stopped trying to get enlightened. Which brings us to the intelligence that's been orchestrating your entire journey. There's an intelligence operating in your life that's infinitely more sophisticated than your personal will. It knows exactly when you're ready for deeper truth, and it doesn't check your calendar first. Let me tell you about my own awakening moment. 3 years ago, I was at complete spiritual rock bottom. 20 years of seeking had left me more confused than when I started. Every practice felt hollow. Every teacher seemed to be performing enlightenment, and I felt like a fraud teaching what I hadn't really found. I remember sitting in my car after walking out of my last satsang, the radio crackling with static, the smell of old coffee and disappointment filling the air. In that moment of absolute defeat, something shifted. Not dramatically. No cosmic fireworks, no dissolving into oneness, no download of universal wisdom. Just a quiet recognition. Oh, I've been looking for something I already am. Here's what I realized in that moment. Every heartbreak, every spiritual failure, every moment of confusion hadn't been obstacles to awakening. They'd been awakening itself, preparing the ground for this simple recognition. The periods when nothing seemed to be happening spiritually? That was when the deepest work was occurring, beneath the radar of my seeking mind. You can't force an apple to ripen by pulling on it. But given the right conditions, sun, rain, seasons, time, it ripens in absolute perfection. Your awakening has been ripening in exactly the same way. Every experience, every disappointment, every moment of doubt has been creating the precise conditions for truth to land. And here's how you know when you're ready. If you're hearing this message and it's landing in your awareness, that's not a coincidence. The same intelligence that governs when flowers bloom and when babies are born has brought you to this recognition. Here's your new spiritual practice, and it might be the simplest thing you've ever heard. Live fully while trusting divine timing. Stop managing your enlightenment schedule. Stop collecting spiritual experiences. Stop measuring your progress against other people's awakening stories. Instead, engage completely with whatever life puts in front of you. Let your experiences, especially the messy, uncomfortable ones, work on you. Trust that your readiness is ripening on a schedule that's more precise than anything your mind could calculate. The seeker and the sought were never separate. They're both movements in the same awakening that's been unfolding all along. You're not broken. You don't need fixing. You're not behind on some cosmic timeline. You're exactly where you need to be, ready for exactly what's ready for you. What if you stopped trying to become awakened and simply noticed that awakening has been happening all along? What if the very exhaustion with seeking that brought you to this video was awakening recognizing itself? Your journey doesn't end here, it begins. But now you're no longer trying to get somewhere else. You're finally free to be exactly where you are. And that might be the most radical awakening of all. What spiritual practice or seeking pattern are you ready to release? Share in the comments. Your insight might be exactly what someone else needs to hear.